Sorry, we're still buffering. It's a bit slow today. Video's live.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular board meeting of October 14th, 2020. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize this meeting is taking place across Coast Salish territory and I believe in some New Channel territory as well. And with that, we will get underway. The first item on our agenda this evening, I believe, is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda, Ms. Legault?
There are not.
If I can get a motion to approve the agenda as presented, Director McGonigal, seconded by Director Sebring. All those in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Moving on to the adoption of minutes. Regular board meeting of September 9th, 2020. If there's no errors or omissions, if I can have a motion to approve those minutes. Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Toporowski. Oh, sorry, Director Morrison.
I believe the recommendation is to amend the first set of minutes, so it's not the normal adoption.
So they be amended to correct the resolution number 2356.1 from 20-292 to 20-297, and that minutes be amended as adopted. As adopted. As amended be adopted. Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Toporowski. Any discussion on those? Seeing none, all those in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Moving on to M2, special board meeting minutes of September 2020. And this one is that the minutes of the special board meeting be adopted if there's no errors or omissions. If I can have a motion to adopt those minutes. Moved by Director Ames, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. All those in favor? And none opposed, motion carries. No business arising, Ms. Legault, so I believe that takes us to public input.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to start the timer. We have quite a number of submissions today. The first item is from Coast Mountain Resources, Richard Granger. He's the applicant for item SR1, Soil Deposit Permit 20-05. This submission is to confirm Coast Mountain Resources' desire for the board to approve our soil deposit permit application for the Trouse Road fill site located on Bamberton properties and to provide additional information beyond what is requested and stated in our application. Having this fill area as a permitted fill site will form an integral part of our business operation for the next 5 years. Coast Mountain Resources employs 10 people who are dependent on our fill site activities to be a viable operation. 9 of these 10 people live in the CVRD. This particular fill site is an expansion of an existing fill area that CMR has been operating since 2014. The soil quality entering the site and the water quality leaving the site are important issues to Coast Mountain Resources. Stringent controls and close monitoring have maintained a clean fill site to date. Water quality being discharged from the site has been independently monitored from a purpose-built monitoring well on an ongoing basis since 2014. During that time, no exceedances have occurred resulting from this test work. The second item is from Cliff Evans. Mr. Chair, on this evening's agenda is SR1, staff report from the GM Land Use Services regarding soil deposit permit, SDC 2005. It was great to see this board refer this application back to staff to take for another look at it by a third-party professional. The professional's report has brought to light deficiencies in the original application, but there are still questions about the presentation to the directors. In the report, it states Type C permits are required to deposit more than 1,000 cubic meters per calendar year. It should read Type C soil deposit permit is a permit authorizing the deposit of soil on a parcel where the volume exceeds 1,000 cubic meters per calendar year. The staff report also states, as with the development permit, where an applicant has met all application requirements under the bylaw, the general manager or board is obliged to issue the permit. Only the board can approve a Type C soil deposit permit. You can see from the attached Local Government Act excerpt that the board is not obliged to approve a soil deposit permit. Even if a board may, by law, deposit soil on any property in the regional district, it must use common sense and respect federal and provincial laws, the public's wishes and covenants, unless it's an emergency. And then he has excerpted Section 327 of the Local Government Act, which I will not read at this time. The next submission is from Bernard Yearlink of Mill Bay. Dear Chair, regarding item SR1, I am shocked that staff considers it appropriate that the applicant supplies an environmental protection plan and site remediation plan for 1600 Glen Lane and not for the site for which a soil deposit permit is requested. Contrary to what the staff wrote, this clearly does not meet the soil deposit permit guidelines. In order to fill the permit requirements, there should be an environmental protection plan and site remediation plan for the actual fill site. Regarding item UB2, I'm very concerned about recommended resolution number 3, that public input period submissions for virtual meetings be forwarded to directors a half hour prior to meeting start time, with the chair providing a verbal summary of input received for the meeting. This appears to be an attempt to censor public input and prevent such input from being part of the public record of the meeting. And there are a series of submissions with respect to item IN5. The first is from Diane Allen, South Cowichan. I vote in federal elections, I vote in provincial elections, and look forward to exercising this right. One Cowichan was not listed in the last elections as a party, nor as my candidate, and I haven't voted for this organization. I believe in climate change and the efforts of our current provincial government's $1 billion budget 2019. As a citizen, I wrote to the CVRD for public input on September 9th, made no false claims, as I hold copies of One Cowichan's financial statements. These were obtained in accordance with the Societies Act. Emails were sent to One Cowichan questioning the Society's public liability insurance, which went unanswered. As a retired insurance professional, I'm dismayed, and if requested, I will forward these documents to the CVRD CAO. I will not be bullied by any organization that's not transparent in their statements and trust their actions in obtaining and grading the CVRD on its climate efforts. Who are they to oversee what belongs to the expertise of the provincial government, CVRD to guide, monitor, and CVRD staff to implement? I'm encouraged by the actions of directors to question demands of any group. The next submission is from Perry and Jackie Foster of North Cowichan, Board of Directors. As per my previous letter of September 9th pertaining to the matter of declaring a climate emergency in the Cowichan Valley, I'd like to reiterate my opposition to the support of such a declaration. As you may be aware, many other residents of the Cowichan Valley also share my concern about the ill-advised nature of making a climate emergency declaration. Such a declaration should be denied. As stated in my previous letter, the official declaration of a climate emergency would initiate a cascade of requirements tied to the UN Initiative on Climate and Development, adding to the already exorbitant tax burden for local citizens. The implied assumption on the part of local community groups such as One Cowichan that this would not be without consequence is false. The requirements could be extremely taxing and are, in any case, not initiated by the local community. This is not a matter to be taken lightly. Once an official emergency is declared, it is assumed that it should be acted on, and the attendant action and results could be far-reaching. In a community such as ours, already beset with serious social problems such as homelessness, an expanding opioid addiction emergency, and other serious problems, the burden of obligation in response to an official climate emergency declaration would be overwhelming and unadvisable. I'd like to reiterate the danger, in my opinion, and that of many others in the community, that the influence of One Cowichan and connected organizations should not escape the notice of the CVRD board. As I stated in my letter of September 9th, One Cowichan shares philosophy and directorship personnel with the Cowichan Valley Transition Group that in turn functions under the philosophical umbrella of the Global Transition Network and its guidelines. The Global Transition Network derives from the UK, and external connections such as this is an unnecessary influence in the Cowichan Valley. The various transition primers, initiative checklists, and descriptions of transition towns were covered in my September 9th letter and show the influence of outside agencies. Let local government handle local problems without outside influence or an attempt to skew the policies of the CVRD. It also remains for us to investigate the connections between organizations, which I urge and consider your responsibility. The next submission is from Rob Sankpeel, Cobble Hill. Ladies and gentlemen, I have significant concerns about a group called One Cowichan and their involvement in our local political scenery. The requirements of the CVRD board do not represent me or anyone I know in the community. I also take great exception to their browbeating the board for an external agenda and their accusations of defamatory comments. I trust that the CVRD board will not fall for this external influence in our community and has already demonstrated their ability to drive our local government. I applaud efforts to get to the bottom of this situation. The next submission is from Diane Moen, North Cowichan. Dear CVRD board members, I'm asking you by way of this letter to deny the request by one Cowichan dated October 1st, signed by Jane Kilthai, asking the CVRD to make an official climate emergency declaration and or report as outlined in item IN5 on the October 14th agenda. In addition to my other concerns previously mentioned to the CVRD board about activities of this group and its affiliates, it would appear they're taking advantage of a global situation to gain control over local governance in the valley. In my opinion, they have amplified the rhetoric around global climate fluctuations that does not reflect detrimental impact. If any, that would be considered to be caused locally. According to the World Resources Institute 2020, Canada nationwide contributes a mere 1.51% of total global emissions, and by those statistics, the amounts that could be considered emanating from our valley would be minuscule. She provides a graph with a breakdown, and if these numbers are further scrutinized, one can see that the largest number shown in the graph, that being 0.46% Canada-wide, attributed to electricity and heat emissions, would not reflect a corresponding usage in the Cowichan Valley, as our climate is not like that of the rest of Canada. Also, the next largest number, 0.37%, attributed to transportation on the graph, and again would not reflect life in our small geographical area. The numbers just do not add up, so it would seem that their obvious aggression to have this climate declaration made is to do with another agenda. That agenda is not made transparent to taxpayers, but it would appear to be one of control and collectivism, as some are saying, claiming the economy from capitalism. That is concerning is the fact that an official emergency declaration will have implications and other responsibilities tied to the UN initiative that taxpayers need to be aware of, as they are the ones paying the bills. Overburdened Cowichan Valley taxpayers have been given no such information, nor have they been given information as to other possible cascading costs and effects of an official climate emergency declaration. We can all be responsible citizens without this proclamation. Thank you for your consideration. Hope you'll take this under advisement. The next item, with 5 minutes left, is Donna Einerson, Cobble Hill. Dear directors, with reference to IN 4 and 5, while one Cowichan is pressing for CVRD to deal with climate change, they themselves do not live up to their own climate change demands. In a previous letter to the CVRD, almost 50% of the 55 supporters live in the rural areas. Does this mean that to cut car emissions to save the planet, these rural people are going to use electric or hybrid car, bus, bike, or walk to get to work and their children to school? Actually, forget about the electric hybrid cars. It requires hydro projects which some believe cause too much climate change, and so far the batteries cannot be recycled. During at least the 2015 federal election, one Cowichan worked to get the vote out by opening their first campaign office, ran radio ads, and drove citizens to the polls. This is climate change action, ? This is a small special interest group in relation to the actual Cowichan Valley population. Just because they ask and demand does not mean the CVRD is required to respond. This also does not mean that the CVRD board members who speak up should be threatened with a violation of code of ethics. And the final submission is from Ed Aiken, Cobble Hill. I object to one Cowichan forcing their agenda on elected officials. This body is out of order by rating directors and boards as if their demands are if only their demands are to be adhered to. I did not vote for these people, yet they seem to think they are our representatives. This is not democracy. These people are a minority of the population and should have no more say than individual voter. If the CVRD bows to their demands, then the board will be irrelevant. May as well pass the keys to the building to them, and all will be done, as they say. How can this group not be considered a political body? They should be subjected to the same standards as any other political party, and if they wish to run for office as a slate, let them follow the same rules. They certainly would not get my vote because I'm a free thinker and refuse to be censored for making up my own mind. In closing, have one Cowichan costed out their demands. The board should make them do this because in the end it will be the taxpayer that bears the brunt of this for the demands. Once this is completed, and if the board decides to implement their plan, the electorate should be allowed to vote on this. Once again, that is what a democracy is about. For the people, by the people, and not some cobbled together group of disgruntled individuals. And Mr. Chair, that concludes public input period.
Okay, sorry, I'm just going to reflect on, there was was another letter that I received earlier today at 9:04 a.m. for public input from Jen White. That was sent to Legislative Services unless it bounced back or something.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have that letter, but I didn't see it related to an item on the agenda as per the public input period policy, but I did see that there was a question at the end that might fit with question period.
Okay, can then we entertain it as part of question period? When I responded to the person and asked them to send it as a piece of correspondence, they said it related to the same item, but if we can make sure that it's entered into the record under question period, I can respond to it then.
Or if you prefer, I can read it now. I didn't see that connection, but.
Like I said, we can deal with it as part of question period.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. I will go back to the agenda, and I believe we are here for delegations. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to admit Janet from the Arts Council into our meeting. Item D1 is Janet Magdance, President, Cowichan Valley Arts Council, with an update on activities and new programs.
Thank you, Ms. Legault, and welcome, Janet. I'm just trying to find you on my screen. There you are.
I'm up here. Hi. Hi, thank you. I am just going to share my screen then. I hope. Oh, there we go. Sorry. All right. Good evening. My name is Janet Magdance. I am the president of the Cowichan Valley Arts Council. We are coming into our 50th year this year, and we're very thankful for the relationship that we've had for so many years with the CVRD. As an Arts Council, we've tried to continue to move forward with the times through the development of new programs and with the improvement of the gallery areas. We have rebranded our gallery and studio space to try to bring it under one umbrella. Our community portal to the arts includes the annex, the gallery, and the studio. The annex, formerly known as Portals, was the original space that you granted us. The gallery is formerly known as the Arbutus Room, and the studio is formerly known as the Masachi Room. In the summer of 2019, a doorway was put in between the annex and the gallery so that the spaces could be used as two separate galleries or be used as one larger space. The studio now has storage space built into the back, but has been finished that it can also be used to enlarge the gallery space. It will also be used for our speaker series, workshops, kids camps, and other family and youth programs. Whoops. Sure. I went the wrong one. There we go. Okay. In a typical year, we hold more than 25 shows. We try to balance between member shows as well as shows from emerging to professional artists. We try to have shows that will evoke emotional responses and challenge thinking. We want people to be able to enjoy and appreciate a variety of art. In our member shows, we want to challenge members to show a message through their art, such as in our Living in Lockdown show, which is on right now, where members express how COVID has impacted their lives. A variety of artists groups can also rent the gallery for the opportunity to show their work. Groups such as VISTA, the Vancouver Island Surface Design Group, as well as the Cowichan Valley Artisans. And other independent artists can rent the space. In our next show in the gallery, 28 artists come together in a show called Elements. The studio is our newest space. In the summer of 2020, A storage space was put in the back of the studio, which allowed us to bring items from a rented storage area to the studio and amalgamate our supplies. Walls of the studio area are left plain so that artwork can easily be displayed. The size of the studio space allows in-person events, even in the midst of COVID. Excuse me. We are starting to have social times for artists to bring the opportunity for growth through fellowship and critique. CVAC has been able to make the amazing changes in the gallery and the studio, first because of the approval from the community center, but also because of our amazing board. These three gentlemen are responsible for the planning and completion of the storage area in the studio. 2 are board members and 1 a very active member. They bring skills that allows us to get work done for the cost of the materials. They are also responsible for the doorway that was created between the 2 galleries. But it's not just them. A situation I will always hold dear is the day after a late board meeting, I walked in the gallery to paint walls, and 7 board members were already there painting and working. Many of our members bring the same dedication to the CVAC. A call out for members to work on a committee was answered by more than I could have hoped for. Our online projects are being made bigger and better because of our new website. This website is more user-friendly and able to provide art to the community. Our greatest online accomplishment was our annual fine arts show. Thousands of people from all over the world were able to enjoy the art. Artists were able to show their art, and the art community was able to experience it even in the midst of COVID. We've been able to offer online art classes via Zoom. This was a valuable outreach that brought students and instructors together. As a part of many shows, we have demonstrations and speakers. For the Living in Lockdown show, an art therapist was enlisted to bring support to artists and to others. The instruction from the art therapist was videotaped and then posted on our website. CVAC is working on a digital project with the Ladysmith Arts Council and 4 other island councils to help improve the digital presence of all island art councils. We are currently working on our strategic plan for 21-26. It will focus on ensuring excellent program for artists and the community with a focus on family and youth. We have partnered on 2 Canada Council grants, the Digital Initiative Strategy with Ladysmith, and Art Finds Me with Jenny Farkas. We are partnering with the Somenos Wildlife Society to provide an annual nature art festival, and we will continue partnerships with the Canadian Mental Health, Intercultural Society, and Providence Farm. We will continue to provide opportunities for education, fellowship, and growth for all people interested in the arts. We plan to make a priority of bringing art and art experiences to family and youth through events, classes, and art shows. Our membership is growing. We will continue to create an art community that reflects all aspects of life. We truly appreciate the support from CVRD, and thank you very much for what you do. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Well, I've got some here. Sorry, we just got some echo there. Janet, thank you very much for that presentation and for all of your work, because I've seen the evolution of that space, and it is really wonderful.
It's amazing. Mm-hmm.
It's a great addition. I'll turn it over to the board for any comments or questions for Janet. Allison, or Director Nicholson, my apologies, go ahead.
That's okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Janet. I'm just amazed at how CVAC has progressed over the years, and I really appreciate what you do in the community and for the community.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We have an amazing board, and yeah, that's what makes it happen. So.
Absolutely. Sorry, did I miss any other hands from other directors? I will say that I'm familiar with the digital grant that you folks got with Ladysmith. And I know you're both over the moon about it. That is such a huge thing. I think you really undersold it, or Kathy's overselling it. One or the other.
Yeah, truly, it's way bigger than what I suggested, but yeah.
No, it's excellent, because I think that in the time of COVID, it was so timely that you get these opportunities to digitize your works and make them available to the world. And I think that there's so much great art within the Cowichan Valley that it can only help broaden that reach and hopefully bring people to the valley to visit the galleries and to participate. So.
And the other piece of it is bringing the councils together. It is so much fun to it's one meeting I really don't mind going to, you know, because what's shared in the energy level even in a Zoom meeting is wonderful. So yeah.
Well, I don't see any other hands, so thank you very much, and you'll get our virtual clap. Thank you so much for all of your work. And
thank you to you as well. We so appreciate your support.
Well, it's an effort worth supporting, so thank you for all of that.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon. Thank you. All right, back to you, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item D2 is Samantha Charlton, BC Agriculture and Food Climate Action Initiative regarding the development of Vancouver Island Regional Strategies Progress Report, and it's for information.
Thank you, and welcome, Ms. Charlton. Welcome. Do you have a presentation for us?
Yes, I sent it in advance. Are you wanting me to just share my screen, or is there a different way you plan to pull it up?
I think through a screen share, Ms. Legault.
Okay, so let me just do that. Okay, so can everybody see that? Yeah, I got a thumbs up. All right. Okay, so I'm with a group called the BC Agriculture and Food Climate Action Initiative. We're a program funded by the Ministry of Agriculture and the federal government. And we worked across Vancouver Island over the last winter and summer, early summer, on a climate change adaptation plan for the agriculture sector. So that was across most of Vancouver Island, other than the very northern part of the island. And one of the partners was the Cowichan Valley Regional District. So we're just reporting back. We only have 10 minutes, but that just shows you what we're going to run through very rapidly. So our group has actually been around since 2008 and was founded from the industry, so from the agricultural sector. They wanted somebody to look into what climate change would mean for agriculture. Very early on, the focus was on adaptation rather than mitigation, so really helping the sector adapt to both risks and opportunities. We're now in our second set of 5-year programs. So we piloted 2 programs from 2013 to 2018, and we're now in a second phase of program delivery of those same 2 programs, working at a regional scale as well as working at a provincial scale. So a regional program is where we partner with essentially regional districts or groups of regional districts. So the Vancouver Island plan, we actually partnered with 5 regional districts. In some other parts of BC, we've partnered with 3 or a single district. And we're looking at broad issues beyond the farm gate that really require industry and government collaboration to solve. We do have another program that does more direct farm level, farm practice issues and does a lot of research and agriculture partnerships. So during the first phase of our program, and we actually did a regional adaptation strategy just with the Cowichan, the CVRD and other partners in the Cowichan Valley, and implemented a number of projects in the early days. I don't have time to go into all of those. We did partner with Economic Development in Cowichan quite a bit and other partners, but it was sort of found that it was a bit too small of a scale to work at, and that was why that was only a pilot. And so coming back with our second phase of 5-year funding, we wanted to work more broadly across Vancouver Island because there are a lot of similarities across the island, similar challenges, similar opportunities, and working with a broader base of both government partners and the agriculture producer base was deemed to be, a more effective approach for making some change and some headway with many of the issues. So the program is looking both to deepen knowledge of risks and opportunities in adaptation through the planning process, and now through implementation to develop tools and resources to help farmers make decisions and help regions make decisions for adaptation. And then also bringing together people to strengthen collaboration and capacity in an ongoing way. So beyond the life of our involvement in our program, hopefully. The planning process itself began last summer and was completed in the spring, and the adaptation strategy was released in early July. In terms of engagement, we did 16 interviews across the region, mostly with producers. We had 6 focus group sessions, so that was 2 sets of 3 sessions that occurred across the island. And the one in sort of southern RDN, sort of the south end of the regional district of Nanaimo, would have engaged some folks from the Cowichan, as well as we had one in the capital region, which some folks drove down for. We had an advisory committee that met multiple times, including one of your directors, Lori, and we now have engaged a couple of your staff in our advisory, and we did have some staff participation in those focus groups. So that's just some of the stats. The plan itself is shown here, and it breaks up the adaptation strategies and actions into 4 impact areas that you can see there. And I'll just go through them briefly one by one on the following slides. It also has detailed climate projections for the region that goes to a little bit of a finer gradient than something you might see elsewhere, and really focuses on the climate metrics that are the most meaningful to agriculture. So warmer and drier summer conditions, I'm sure you're all familiar with some of these issues. There's a lot of work going on in this area in your region. The left there just sort of summarizes what the key climate changes are that we're looking at and already experiencing. And then some of the top actions flagged, we did sort of many rounds of engagement and sort of voting to come out with the top actions. And the main area to work on is agricultural input into watershed planning processes and creating and supporting multi-stakeholder roundtables and councils with a focus on water. There's a lot going on actually in the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District, and we're looking at getting a project off the ground to tie some of the work in different regional districts together with a focus on agriculture. Changing pests and beneficial insect populations. We actually already have a project getting off the ground in this area. It's gone out for a call for expressions of interest, and it's closed, so they're looking for a contractor on this work. This is looking at baseline information on pest pollinators and beneficial insects, what research has been done, what monitoring has been done, where are the gaps, and getting a project off the ground to increase monitoring of these insects, beneficial and pests across the island, and also to increase knowledge transfer and support for the agriculture sector around management, but beginning with the monitoring as a first step. The next area was increasing variability and shift in crop suitability. So this does get into a little bit more of that opportunistic side of climate change. We do see an increase in growing degree days and growing season length, but accompanied by that is also extreme events and shifting precipitation patterns and variability. So some of the actions that came to the top, we're looking at supporting crop suitability trials and research to find crops that will both take advantage of the growing season length, but also be resilient with variability and extreme conditions. And there's a project getting off the ground already in this regard. It's actually got an open call for expressions of interest right now, looking for some folks to do some initial planning and development of a framework and plan across the island for some crop trials and research. And then the fourth area, increasing precipitation and extreme rainfall events. This is looking at the sort of opposite side of too much water and at the wrong times, which we're seeing. Annual precipitation's going up, and that's happening sort of at times when it's not necessarily ideal. So that's autumn, winter, and spring precipitation. And it's coming more in concentrated extreme events. So some actions flagged are some work to document where the runoff impacts are the worst onto agricultural lands, expand awareness of this issue with a range of stakeholders, and support producers with implementation of runoff and drainage management practices. So this is looking at the runoff onto agricultural lands from either upland development or forestry, which is causing producers to not be able to use their land to its greatest potential. So we flagged a number of actions around that. And I'm just highlighting some of the very sort of top actions and ideas. And the plan obviously goes into a lot more detail with what could be done and how it could be done, looking at costs and steps and partners and so on. So there are numerous synergies with other plans and initiatives going on in the CVRD. We had some discussion with Economic Development Cowichan and one or more of your planning staff looking at where some tie-ins are, and there certainly are tie-ins with all 4 of the impact areas, and lots of opportunities for connection and synergy. We did, of course, review numerous plans and look at what had been done and what we could build on in developing the strategies in the plan. Implementation was started in July, so immediately upon release of the plan. As I mentioned, we have 2 projects about to begin. Just contractors are being sought right now. We have until January of 2023 to implement the work. The completion of the plan comes with $300,000 of funding from the Agricultural Partnership, Canadian Agricultural Partnership, and that's spread across all of the region. So we choose projects that have sites across the various regions we're partnering with and that are beneficial to different parts of the island as well as different parts of the agriculture sector. We are looking to leverage at least $100,000 in additional funds, if not more. All of the projects are overseen by our local working group, and I've listed there some of the examples of the types of funders we look to collaborate with. I see I'm at my 10 minutes, but I just have 1 or 2 more slides, so I'll press on here. One of the purposes of this presentation was to hope to elicit some continued regional district participation. We do still have Lori on our working group, as well as 2 staff members, and we do want continued participation in the working group. There's the option for working group members to assist with project oversight at a slightly more in-depth level. There's the opportunity for the regional district to actually take on and administer projects if they are very sort of squarely linked to your service areas. And we have in other parts of the province had regional districts actually administer and lead projects. And we've also had many regional districts choose to co-fund projects. So that's just in a slide showing some examples of local government participation. In a recent plan where we partnered with Fraser, Fort George, and Bulkley and Chaco up north, each of them contributed a lump sum of $15,000 over a 3-year implementation period, $5,000 per year for our choice of projects. Other regional districts have chosen a specific project that's very closely aligned with their needs or with things they're planning, and they've partnered with that project. The Fraser Valley Regional District has partnered on numerous projects, and I've just listed a couple there. These are just some recent partnerships. I'll skip over this, but you can refer back to it in a copy of the presentation. It's just highlighting some of the media attention the release of the plan garnered, including the Minister of Agriculture visiting one of the farmers and speaking with producers when the plan was released and doing an interview. And there's our contact information for future reference. And I will leave it there and take any questions, and hope that the presentation can be distributed if there is any follow-up that any of you would like to do.
Thank you very much. And we do all have a copy of the presentation in our agenda. We just think it's better if you're able to present it. So thank you for that. And if we can get the presentation lowered, I'll be able to see the directors and we can go for questions.
Okay, I have stopped sharing, so hopefully that did it.
Thank you. Director Yanni DiNardo first, and then Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for you to Samantha. I just, it's a comment more than anything else, not a question. I'd like to thank Samantha and Foster and the crew for all of what you've been doing, and it's been very valuable and informative for me, and I think it will be valuable for the Cowichan Valley as well. So thank you for all that you've done, and thank you for the presentation tonight.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Director Wilson.
Yeah, pretty much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pretty much mirroring what Director Yanni DiNardo has just said. This is great stuff. Speaking as one who doesn't have a green thumb at all and can't grow things at all. So I'm really very impressed by the kind of work that these organizations do. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from directors? Director Nicholson.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So I'm working on the Coxsila Watershed Planning Initiative, and I want to make sure that we can hook into whatever you have to offer. And so is the best way through Doug Pepper and the ag people that we already have involved, or how would that work?
Yeah, so Doug Pepper and Jill Hatfield are both on our advisory committee, or our working group. My colleague Foster and the director of our organization, Emily McNair, have also had many targeted meetings about that specific initiative with both Doug as well as another fellow. I can't recall his name right now. I believe he's involved in environmental farm plan. So we are connected, and once we get some of those projects flagged to the warmer and drier summer conditions off the ground, we'll know more precisely what those connections are. But we are getting the projects rolling in a staggered way. So stay tuned to hear more about that. We're hoping that we'll be able to do a cross-regional project that sort of leverages what you're learning in the Coxsila watershed for other regions to sort of learn from it, and vice versa.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Ms. Charlton? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation and all of the work and information that you brought forward to us tonight. And I wonder if there's a role here for the Cowichan Watershed Board in that we are looking so detailed at Coxsila, the farm impacts and the impacts on forestry upstream from Coxsila. So I think, as Director Nicholson mentioned, there are other ways for us to continue to engage and support your work or exchange information. So we'll look forward to those opportunities, and we'll follow up after this meeting. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
Thank you. All right. And then, so I believe we're moving on. We're at report of the chairperson. I do not have a report tonight, but I was going to cede a moment to Director Nicholson. Just from that presentation, I think there's another opportunity for some engagement on climate action. And I'll just put that through to you quickly, Allison.
Oh, thank you very much. So I'm going to plug, as you know, I'm on, represent the board on the Coastal Communities Climate Change sort of group that's trying to develop a plan for the island. And there is a Resilience Summit November 6th, which will be virtual. And I really encourage you to participate. It would be great to have a good turnout from the Valley, because it's, I think, a really critical opportunity to work with other local governments in the region. We really need to work together because it's a big issue, and it's not something that we as small individual jurisdictions can really tackle in many ways. So I hope that you come out to it, and I will pester you with emails about it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So I believe with that, on that note, we can move to the next item, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On to correspondence. Item C1 is correspondence from Chief James Thomas on behalf of the Halalt First Nation and its council regarding a request for a letter of support, Federation of Canadian Municipalities Green Municipal Fund grant submission.
Thank you. Can staff give us a bit of guidance here? To ask for direction, but we don't have a suggested resolution or direction. I'll go to Director Yanni DiNardo as you raise your hand. Go ahead, Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you. That was kind of my question. Like, I've seen this, I haven't seen this before, and I just had a few questions on, I see that there was a letter of support. I had, quite a few questions on this and just wondered how we would go about that, since this is only correspondence and not a person that we can speak to.
Mr. Carruthers?
Just getting unmuting here. Yeah, I would have to have a closer look at the request, Mr. Chair, in terms of how to respond. If you have any more speakers, I would like to review the letter here a little bit more closely.
Okay, I'll come back to you, Director Yanni DiNardo. I'll go to Director Sebring and then Marsh, and then we'll see where we're at with Mr. Carruthers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We received the same letter with the municipality of North Cowichan, and council authorized me as mayor to write a letter of support. And based on what I know about this project and the needs for it, and what they're trying to do, pending what we hear from Mr. Carruthers, I'm prepared to make the motion to authorize the chair to write a letter of support on behalf of the board, because I do think it's a worthwhile project.
Thank you. Mr. Carruthers?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I had consulted with staff on this application, and it was completely appropriate. It's simply a letter of support. It is in the North Cowichan municipality, but their objectives are consistent with the CVRD's objectives, and staff had seen no reason why we wouldn't support that application.
So on that,
second your motion now.
On that basis, then, Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion that the board authorize the chair to write a letter of support for the whole nation with respect to the FCM Green Municipal Fund submission.
And that's been seconded by Director Staples. I'll go back to my speakers list. I have Director Marsh, and I'll go back to Director Yanni DiNardo before we call that question. Director Marsh.
Yeah, just to say that I'm really excited that finally in Cowichan we have one of these partnerships potentially about to bloom. I think FCM, I first heard about these First Nations and local government partnerships. Gosh, it's got to be 8 years ago or something. And to have the halal bring something forward and that's so well thought out. And, they're not asking us for money. They're just asking for our support. And so I'm in favor of it. Thank you.
Director DiNardo next, and then Director McGonigal. I have a feeling that we're probably all in support of this, so.
I will pass and go to Director McGonigal.
Okay, Director McGonigal.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that the town of Lake Cowichan has received similar requests from adjacent First Nations communities that we have endorsed with no ask for financial contributions. It's just a collaborative approach to these projects and these grant applications. So I too will be supporting this.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? And none opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item IN1, Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, Summary Report, South Island Transportation Strategy for information.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on this item? I think at a time in the not too distant future, especially when we have a provincial government back in, I think we should invite our friends at the Ministry of Transportation to come speak to this plan. But I think at this time, we obviously can't engage with them, but I did see Director Nicholson. I think I saw you raise your hand.
Yes, I wanted to say that I heard both you and Mayor Staples on the radio discussing this strategy, and I agreed pretty strongly with your comments. And I feel an unfortunate thing happened in my area this past month. We have, if you know Allenby Road, it goes from basically from Coxila, the bottom of Coxila, along the bottom of the hill there to the bridge, and in the business park. And last year I went to UBCM and discussed with staff the importance of working on a plan together to make it more safer for pedestrians and cyclists in the Miller Road, Allenby Road Indian Road, Coxila area, that it's a fairly densely populated area, and it's very close to town, and it really is very important for improving people's safety to get to town. And I know that Cowichan Tribes has interest in this as well. It's in their transportation plan. We had this discussion, and then just the other day they had, I don't know, end of year money or something, and they just threw it at Allenby Road and paved it without taking the time to let us know and to see if we could work out something that would make the shoulders safer and better for people. And I really feel this strategy it kind of speaks to the fact that it's still very vehicle centered, and there really needs to be some concrete commitments to working in the rural areas to make our roads better for everyone. And so I think it's an important topic, and I would like us to come back to discussing it at some point in committee again. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Morrison and then Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, you know, I guess timing is everything, or in this case, it wasn't great. I think it's generally accepted that this was a report that had to get out the door before a specific date, and that's what happened. I was asked by the discourse about the lack of detail on any of the ICF lands and plans and the likes, and obviously there's much more work to be done. And along with what Director Nicholson had said, I think we might be wise to take this specific item as just the starting point, because most of what was mentioned here ended at the Malahat. And I could see us stepping up and advocating in a really major way to get the next phase or the next step of this study to have an impact in our areas. I know that there's transit, there's all the modes of transportation. There's been lots of study done. It just didn't make it into this report before the election was called. And I think we're in a good position to start with the advocacy and get some of this work put into a 2.0 plan, so that we can we can get some of these things done in our area before the end of this term happens. And I see Mr. Wakeham's on the screen. I'd love to hear if he's got any suggestions that might dovetail with that. Thank you.
I'll go to Mr. Wakeham and then Director Yanni DiNardo. Mr. Wakeham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Director Morrison. When we received this report, they did ask, MOT did ask us if we wanted a presentation to the board in the near future. And so, I'm taking your direction on that. I think it's very wise. I would, if you want me to go through and give you my comments on it, but I think the long and short of it is, you're right. It seemed to be a bit of a rush report coming out, lacks some details, but there are some pluses in here where the severity is mentioned, and that is, really about expanding the South Cowichan Park and Ride is identified as a short-term priority. Adding more trips to the Capital Regional District is a medium term. And then another short term under a separate goal is really trying to encourage interregional trails between CVRD and the Capital Regional District. So I could take it absolutely as direction to work with other management to set up a meeting in the near future with MOD to come back, and you can put a slate of questions together, and they can also give a bit of an overview of this report if you like.
Thank you. Is that okay with Director Morrison for now? I'll go to Director Yanni DiNardo and then Director McGonigal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did speak to the minister about this, and we did also speak to the minister about having a plan and a long-term in different areas and having it mapped out, that a director after director, so that we're not doing the pointy elbows. But I'm really saddened to hear about Allenby Road, because Cowichan Bay Road, the same thing happened to me quite a few years ago. Cowichan Bay Road was paved, unbeknownst to me, and it had this great big lip. There was a cyclist who had to use his bike to go to work, broke his collarbone the next day after being on the pavement because there were 6 inches, the pavement had no shoulder. And besides that, I mean, it continues to flood. But so it would have been nice to have more input. But I think that the minister, what I heard when we were at that meeting at UBCM, that is something that they're working on, but a presentation is definitely needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McGonigal.
Thank you. It is a tough word to say sometimes, Director Stone. I think speaking to not only the South Island transportation strategy, but also piggybacking on the need for an active transportation strategy region-wide, taking into account some of those areas that Director Nicholson spoke of that have been brought forward by Cowichan tribes on the need for safety issues for pedestrians and cyclists, etc. So in that presentation, also piggybacking that there could be a collaborative approach on an active transportation plan within the strategy of the South Island plan as well. And I think if we had a shovel-worthy project, as has been noted in other discussions, that could piggyback on this strategy as well in those discussions. I think it's important to remember that we're not focused just on automotive transportation or transit, that there are other modes that people do utilize a greater value, not only health-wise, but strategic climate initiatives as well. So if we can piggyback the two of them on that strategy, this focuses more on the larger infrastructure, but having that focus as well, not a region-wide active transportation plan, but a collaborative one in areas where it makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe I had Director Marsh and then Director Sebring. And again, this is an information item. I think we're going to have substantial discussion about this over time, but go ahead, Director Marsh and then Director Sebring.
Well, I think I heard Mr. Wickham say it would be valuable to have I guess it's MOTI, come and give us a more fulsome report, and I heard another director say they had a lot of questions that weren't answered by it. So I would like to move that we invite them to come, and I think staff will know when it will be best. I'm not saying next time or anything, and give us a presentation and share our thoughts and ideas with them. And perhaps in between now and when they come, we should put on our agenda what our thoughts and ideas are and see if we can come to some kind of consensus about it.
So I believe the motion before we went into the supporting was to make a motion to invite MOTI to come present to the board on the South Island, or no, it would be the committee. Mr. Wakeham would be more appropriate.
Sure, that would make sense to the Community Services Committee if you'd like. May I add a comment while I'm have the phone here? Is that bear in mind, this was a very high visionary document. This was not meant, if you look at, they focused on four main areas: the Malahat, Souk Highway, Swartz Bay to Victoria, and West Shore to downtown Victoria. They didn't look at detail in the West Shore or in Souk or obviously in Cowichan. So your request is valid. I understand where you're coming from, but that was not the intent of this document. It was meant to identify the four key areas where there was bottlenecks and challenges and safety issues. But by all means, we can definitely ask for them to see if they'll consider doing a more in-depth one just for our region.
Mr. Chair, may I ask Mr. Wakeham a question?
Go ahead and we'll try and get to a motion. Go ahead, Mr. Wakeham.
So, Mr. Wakeham, I thought I saw in a list of the areas that you've mentioned, and it included CVRD, but I can't remember what page. So, do you remember what context we were mentioned in then?
If I may, Mr. Chair, through to Director Marsh, yes, the page is actually, if you'd like to, the page of the report is 21. The page of the overall CVRD documents is 129. It comes under Goal 2, and the Goal 2 is strengthening connections between the communities, and that's where they reference the South End Park and Ride enhancement capacity issue. We've been looking at that for a number of years, and then it also references there the medium term as well, which is enhancing the commuter services to Victoria. Remember, this is more of a high level in between communities. It was not meant to focus directly in the community itself or the region. And then also on page 24 of the report, or 132 of the CVRD package, Goal 4 talks about encouraging the active transportation options, which is when they talk about encouraging and enhancing the interregional trails between Capital Regional and District and CVRD.
Okay, thank you. Well, I made the motion. I don't know if it's been seconded.
So it would be to invite the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to present to the Community Services Committee regarding the South Island Transportation Study. Does that sound correct? Okay, it's moved by Director Marsh, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any discussion on the motion? I'll come back to you, Director Sebring, if you don't want to speak on the motion. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. If I can go to Director Sebring now, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just, I'm totally in support of the motion. We can also, I think, count on some regional cooperation here. I know this study came up at the Capital Regional District meeting last week, and I was communicating with Mayor David Screech and View Royal, and they have expressly said this strategy doesn't go far enough. We need to address a comprehensive strategy from the NIMO south, not just in terms of connectivity between the communities, but also stuff that actually happens on the ground there. So we potentially have some support of the CRD. So I would suggest that we, or staff or somebody, reach out so we can do a sort of collective, collaborative approach to the province when that time comes. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll, keep my comments brief, but I will, reflect on the previous presentations by Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure staff. I would just say that what I felt was communicated in those drafts and those engagement sessions just didn't seem to get reflected here based on what my understanding was. And though I do appreciate your comments, Mr. Wakeham. All right, so no more discussion on this information item. I believe, Ms. Legault, we're on to IN2 of a long agenda.
You're correct, Mr. Chair. Correspondence from Brian Vroom, Ministry of Environment and Climate Change regarding the CVRD Liquid Waste Management Plan Stage 1 final report.
Thank you very much. Any discussion or questions on this item? I think it says good job on phase 1, but you have more work to do. That's my summary. Not seeing any further discussion, Ms. Legault will move on to IN3.
IN3 is circular number 2018 from Kai Krishna, Deputy Minister of Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing regarding Community Economic Recovery Infrastructure Program.
Thank you. Any discussion on this item? Well, I don't see any hands. I have a brief question for staff. Cutoff for this program is the end of this month for applications. Is there an anticipation of any applications being forwarded to the board for consideration before the deadline?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I brought this matter forward to our senior management team at our meeting last week after receiving the correspondence, and staff and all the departments of the organization are looking at potential projects so that they could bring forward to the board for approval prior to that deadline. We would be coming to the October 28th board meeting.
Thank you very much.
And further to that, Mr. Chair, we would certainly be interested in hearing from any directors that have any ideas, or the board, which is why it's on the agenda for tonight, if there was some suggestions.
If any directors have suggestions, now would be the time to raise them. If not, you may be able to engage in short order with staff to get it in the pipeline for discussion at the next meeting. Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If staff's willing to take suggestions, I would really appreciate the support of them looking at the Think Shawnigan plan and seeing where we could get some grant funds for some of the initiatives outlined in the Think Shawnigan.
Thank you.
And
okay, so if staff take that under advisement, I don't think it would be necessary to make a motion at this time.
No, Mr. Chair, and there's a number of categories in the funding program, but we would have to make sure that that whatever projects come forward would fit within the 4 categories. And but there appears to be a lot of options for us to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I would just say, from a regional district versus municipal perspective, it does seem frustrating that a broad range of communities in a regional district would have to split, sort of the maximum amount of applications, which is 2 per local government for all 4 streams combined. But I think if we're smart, one of the things that I know our staff is engaged on is that you can bundle initiatives for different areas within the district, as long as it comes under the cap. And for our community, we've had like a wayfinding signage program that's been collecting dust for the last 4 years because we couldn't cobble together the funding to do it. And we will be applying for that funding because it's not often those kinds of streams come up. So good on you, Director Acton, for mentioning the Think Shawnigan plan, because there are probably some elements in there that not only fit the COVID recovery objectives, but also satisfy existing needs or demands from the community. So I would encourage all the directors, especially those with a small town area or village area, to look at those opportunities to help support your businesses, but also to build out some infrastructure that may have been lagging that you've wanted to do. So I would encourage you all, though, to engage with staff quickly, because it's a really short timeline. And if you want to put a good application in, it's important to get started. So, all right, any further discussion on that tonight? All right, seeing none, we will move on. Oh, Director Sebring.
Yeah, just a small point. I know there's a bunch of private sector applications coming as well. We have two requests for letters of support coming to our council next week. One from the Raptor Center on Herd Road that wants to do some work, and one from the society that looks after Elkington House in Maple Bay. Those will be under the Destination Development Unique Heritage Infrastructure bullets in the application. So I'm optimistic, whether it's local governments or other organizations. I'm hoping the Cowichan Valley does end up with some of this money. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no further discussion, we will move on. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item IN4, correspondence from Matt Price, co-founder One Cowichan, regarding CBRD Code of Conduct for elected officials, for information.
Thank you. I'm going to take a brief opportunity to say a brief piece on this from my perspective, and that is, I'll come to you, Director Kuhn, to reflect on my role in the concerns of Mr. Price, and I will not go into detail, but I will take responsibility and apologize for not managing the meeting and the item more effectively. I think the discussion reflected that, and I do apologize for that. I think we'll have further discussions as we move forward around the substantive issues around climate change. But I think that for today, I will only say to Mr. Price, I apologize for the lack of good meeting management on my part as chair. And with that, I will move on to Director Kuhn.
Mr. Price, in his letter to the CAO, requested an apology from me, and I herewith would like to officially apologize to Mr. Price for mentioning his name. There was no intent of mine to mention his name for any derogatory reason or whatever. I mentioned his name only because I gave $100 and the organization didn't exist at the time, and I gave it to him. And so I could have said I put $100 on the table. That would have probably solved the problem. So I apologize. I will stay away from mentioning names.
Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hang on a second. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I make no apology for my previous remarks. They are an honest reflection of my considered opinion. And I've never, and nor will I ever, submit to bullying, intimidation, coercion, or threats, all of which are contained in this communication referred to as IN4. I am on record as having stated before that I am not a climate change denier, and I will continue to state and defend that position. I did not witness climate changes from a lounger in an all-inclusive annual foreign vacation enclave. I did not witness climate changes from a central point in a confined radius in one particular geographical area. Over a 50-year career, I witnessed climate changes from vessels and ships in practically every ocean in the world. I witnessed miles and miles of bioluminescence, trails of living creatures sparkling behind vessel propulsion wakes, the like of which are rarely seen anymore. I witnessed climate changes while periodically based in a multitude of countries and continents during international telecommunications project. I witnessed climate changes relayed from cameras and sensors attached to deep sea cable burial plows and extended depth remotely operated vehicles. My background in ocean research and conservation includes working closely with the University of Victoria, Ocean Networks Canada, the U.S. National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, the U.S. Department of Justice, and the Monterey Bay Aquarium. From concept to operation of undersea observatories of the Neptune, Venus, Mars, and Nemo arrays, capturing data 24/7, which are available in real time to international scientists and researchers everywhere. I have been involved with ocean-based wind farms in UK and Europe. I have been involved with large-scale tidal electricity generation in the Bay of Fundy and in the Straits of Juan de Fuca. I am a hands-on experiential climate change eyewitness. I will therefore continue to do all I can to support changes and advocate for change which will benefit this planet and generations to follow. I will not support any organization who, in my considered opinion, resorts to bullying, intimidation, coercion, or threats to muzzle free speech. Thank you.
Sorry, I thought you were telling me I was talking too much, Klaus. If you could mute your microphone, Director Nicholson, I recognize Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I would like to move that we refer the Code of Conduct to committee for review.
Seconded by Director Staples. Any discussion on the referral? On the propriety of referral? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, the motion carries. Any further discussion on item IN4? Seeing none, I will go to Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item IN5, correspondence from Jane Kilthai, Director, One Cowichan Educational Society, regarding a request for report on the region's climate actions for information.
Director Morrison.
I'm just have a process question. So there was we just passed a resolution to refer the Code of Conduct to committee for review. And if I'm not mistaken, the Code of Conduct was a product of the Directors Select Committee. So where are we referring the Code of Conduct to? And I would love to hear what staff's thoughts are on that.
Thank you. I would follow through to staff on which committee, the unnamed committee, which would be the appropriate committee to refer that to. Would it be back to the Director Select Committee?
Yeah, I would have to consult with our corporate officer as to whether the objectives of that committee were met and whether it's still current. If it is, I would suggest that that's where that be referred back to for discussion. But you are, I think, going to want to have a broader discussion at very likely it would be your Corporate Services Committee to discuss matters involving governance.
Yeah, so again, now we don't have clarity. My understanding is the Directors Select Committee has achieved its mandate. Its objectives had been forwarded to the board. So I would entertain that go to the Corporate Services Committee where the Code of Conduct lives, so to speak. Director Morrison? Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on IN4? Now we're going to IN5, and I'm not sure if I missed somebody's hand on IN5. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I would just like clarification on when our strategic plan, which does address climate change in a number of the areas, when that's going to be released, or?
The draft should be presented to the board at the next regular meeting, I think, which is the 28th.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
So I would ask that that be forwarded the draft to the board. I'll work with the CAO because I believe he sent me a draft for review. I haven't done that yet. So I'll do that post haste and get that back to staff, and then we'll get that on the next board agenda for the board. Thank you. Not seeing any other hands on this item. Oh, Director Seaburn, go ahead.
I just think we need a little bit of clarity on this piece of correspondence. Based on what we heard on public input, there are some people who think that this is a request for us to declare a climate emergency. The fact is that the board acceded to that request back on November 13th. And that's already been done. And I was one of 4 directors who voted against that at that time. Because I was slow on the trigger finger at that time, I didn't get a chance to speak against the motion. I didn't get a chance to say why I was going to oppose it. But I went back through some of my speaking notes that I had for that meeting, and I hate to say I told you so, but I was right. You know, I was worried at that time that a declaration for the climate emergency would lead to precisely the kinds of things that we're seeing now. Because if indeed we honestly believe we're in an emergency, we better be doing something. And the question is legitimately coming to us now. Well, what are you doing? You've declared an emergency. You know, when we have the opioid crisis, homelessness, affordable housing, street disorder, all these other emergencies, this one somehow made it to the top of the list. And the board has done what it's done. I'm not trying to revisit that. I'm just saying the kinds of decisions that we made on November 13th had these kind of consequences. That's all.
Thank you. And I just want to clarify that the CBRD board chose not to use the term declare an emergency. They acknowledged the climate emergency at that meeting. So,
which is what we did at North Cowichan as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any, Director Kuhn, is that what you're going to clarify? Okay, I'm going to speak on this for one moment because of the public input, and I don't want it to sow debate. I just think it's important that I enter my perspective in this. We receive and measure input from all sorts of organizations. We're not beholden to any organization, or we should not be. I don't believe that anybody on this board is. I believe we have varied and broad opinions on the issues of climate change, on economic challenges, on homelessness, on addiction. That's our role as elected officials. But to say or to suppose that we're beholden to any one perspective or group would definitely not speak to the diversity of perspectives on this board. So I think it's important that whether it's One Cowichan or Cowichan Works or any other community organization, it's incumbent upon us to receive that information and just to take it as advice and instruction from their point of view. What really matters is that no external organization ever speaks for us, for our citizens, nor do we have a responsibility to act solely on that input. What we do have a responsibility is to hear it, to put weight to the input and balance it based on our individual perspectives and our collective perspectives, and to move forward based on those priorities of our region, our citizens, and the elected members of this board. So I appreciate the public input, but all I'm asking for from the communities and from our directors is that we approach it as that. This is feedback for us. We can choose to accept it or reject it in any measure from 0 to 100% that we feel is appropriate based on our own analysis, and bring those perspectives to the board. So I have a lot of time for diverse opinions from one scale to the other end of the scale, and we have those in many ways represented here. But when it comes to climate change, I don't believe that this board has any shame in their lack of action. In fact, we've received multiple awards or been finalists for multiple awards in terms of our own climate action within the region. Absolutely. I think I watch EASC, and whenever the modernization of the OCP, land use impacts for a broadly diverse regional district are the biggest impacts on climate. And some of the letters referred to that tonight. So how do we address those issues? Through updating our OCP. North Cowichan's updating their OCP. Ladysmith is updating its OCP. Lake Cowichan's trying to get a mayor, but I'm sure they're going to update their OCP. But all I'm trying to say is that I don't think we're as far apart as this dialogue has become. And the rancor that seems to be coming forth internally and externally, I don't think is deserved to anybody, not to the members of this board, not to our staff, and not to any of the citizens in the region. So all I can say is that I feel like tonight we should move forward from that. We've had this discussion. We'll have an opportunity at our strategic plan. And where it really matters is once that strategic plan is on the table and approved by the board, that we work with our staff to bring back sensible, measured, and responsible actions that will not only support climate action, but also support economic recovery and growth, because I've said this before, they are not mutually exclusive, right? Green initiatives can support a great, thriving economy. But we also have to recognize that as a local government with a very limited tax base, I'm never going to advocate for this board or any other local government to take on the responsibilities of the province or federal government. And we need to bring these community groups together and help them be the wind in our sails, not a headwind, and help us advocate to the provincial government, help us lobby the federal government. So I'm making that as my plea to all of the community organizations and citizens that continue to weigh in on these issues, that I don't think we're that far apart. And I hope that we can move forward once we get our strategic plan on the table and actually show that it's not one or the other, they actually go hand in hand. So that's my speech. Thank you for listening. And hopefully, Ms. Legault, we can move on to the next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On to committee and commission reports. Item CR1, report and recommendations of the Special Corporate Services Committee meeting of September 9th, 2020.
I believe I turn this over to Director McGonigal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just for your information, we have updated our OCP, even in the absence of residing mayor. But he will inherit that when he or she becomes mayor. So your report and recommendations of the Special Corporate Services Committee meeting of September 9th, 2020 with the following recommendation: that the public consultation plan outlined in the August 6, 2020 report from the Finance Division be approved. And 2, that the 2021 budget for Function 520, Solid Waste Management, include a requisition increase of $602,354 over the 2020 budget. And I will move that recommendation with those 2 parts.
And that's seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any discussion on those items? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Director McGonigal.
That concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll move on to item CR3, report and recommendations of the Cowichan Community Center Commission meeting of September 10th, 2020. Over to Director Yanni DiNardo.
Mr. Chair, you missed item CR2.
So I'm really excited. I knew there was one in here. I'm like, Director Acton was first. Why don't you take that role and I'll try and stick to my knitting. Or I can read out the item if you prefer. I already screwed it up, so I was giving it back to you.
Sorry, CR2 is the report and recommendations of the Community Services Committee meeting of September 9th, 2020.
Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The recommendation is one that a usage fee for CVRD's publicly accessible level 2 electric vehicle EV charging stations be established at a rate of $1 per hour effective January 1st, 2021. And 2, that a public notification period of 60 days be provided as described in the September 9th, 2020 staff report pursuant to the informed level of public engagement as specified within CVRD's public engagement policy. And 2.1, that the 2 certificates of sufficiency confirming sufficient petitions requesting inclusion into the Malahat Fire Protection Service area be received. And 2, that CVRD bylaw number 2414, Malahat Fire Protection Service Establishment Bylaw 2003 be amended to include 7 properties described as PID 027675149, PID 027514366, PID 027675246, PID 029941962, PID 029735921, PID 001106686, and PID 029942004. 3.1, that the 2 certificates of sufficiency confirming sufficient petitions requesting inclusion into the Eagle Heights Fire Protection Service area be received. 2, that CVRD bylaw number 1965, Eagle Heights Fire Protection Service bylaw 1999 be amended to include 2 properties described as PID 000578541 and PID 000578479. And number 4, that the automatic aid agreement between CVRD for North Oyster Volunteer Fire Department and the town of Ladysmith for Ladysmith Fire Rescue to provide fire services during structure fire emergencies be approved. And 5, that the invitation to bid for the 2024 winter, 2026 winter, and 2026 summer BC Games be denied. And I so move those items.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any discussion on those items? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. We're up on our hour-and-a-half break, so I'm just going to call a 10-minute break, if that's okay. Please be back at the table to resume at 8:10 if you are able. Thank you all so much.
Cameras live.
Thank you very much. And so we resume our meeting. I was really excited to get down to this report. So it's CR3, the report and recommendations of the Cowichan Community Centered Commission meeting of September 10th. And I'll turn it over to Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Recommendation 1, that a letter be written to the local member of Parliament and member of the Legislative Assembly outlining the issues facing civic theaters due to the lack of provincial and federal funding during the COVID-19 pandemic. 2.1, that the reopening of the Cowichan Performing Arts Center, CPAC, with audiences of up to 50 be approved. 2, that the staff be authorized to adjust the audience size in accordance with the directives from the Provincial Health Authority. I move those.
I have a seconder, Director Staples, second. I just have a quick question for staff, or through to the director. Would this be a letter from the CVRD on behalf of the Cowichan Community Center?
I believe it would. Ms. Schrader is on here. That's what I understood.
Hi, Ms. Schrader.
Hi, everybody. Yes, that's what the request was, that if the board so wanted, that you would sign a letter on behalf of the CVRD.
Thank you. And I just want to remind directors, when you're not speaking, to please mute your microphones. So just getting some background noise from different desks, it sounds like. Thank you for that. Any further discussion on these items? Seeing none, all those in favor? And any opposed? Carries. Thank you, Ms. Schrader, and thank you for all your work. And I believe we're on to CR4, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The report and recommendations of the Special Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of September 16th, 2020.
Mr. Chair, we seem to have some interest in pulling a couple of items here. I've heard from a director they'd like number 1 pulled, and I've heard talk from a few directors that items 3, 2, 7 might like to be referred back to committee for further discussion. So I think I'll proceed with the ones that I know we're going to proceed with, and then we can go back to the others. How's that sound? All right, item number 2. 1, that CVRD bylaw number 3393, Shawnigan Station Area Association Annual Financial Contribution, Area V, Shawnigan Lake, Service Establishment Bylaw 2011, be amended to increase the annual requisition limit by 25%. And 2, that the 2021 draft budget for Function 478, Shawnigan Station Area Association, be amended to increase the requisition by 10%. Item number 8. That a policy review on the criteria for expenditures for UBCM, FCM, AVICC, conferences and seminars, and community information be conducted. 9, that a 5% requisition increase to Area F Parks Function 236 be approved to allow for the completion of minor and major capital projects already underway. And 10, that staff work with the director for Area B, Shawnigan Lake, to create a business case for the expenditure to complete the Phase 3 Shawnigan Rail Trail project for the 2021 draft budget. And I would move those items.
Seconded by Director Salmon. Any discussion on those items? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Back to you, Director Morrison.
I guess we may as well go to the top, and it's item number 1. I'll move that individually, that the 2021 budget for Function 250 Electoral Area Services include a 1.99% increase in Electoral Area Director's remuneration.
That's been moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Acton. Discussion on that item. Director Salmon.
Yeah, thank you. Well, as I mentioned, when we discussed this in committee, we got a 30% budget mandate this year. I think it's important for director to lead by example, so I'm thinking we should have 0% this year. So I'll be voting against this.
Just to remind directors, please mute your microphones when not in use. Thank you. It was Director Marsh. Yeah, thank you. It was yours because I could see your square lighting up when the feedback loop came. But thank you for muting your microphone. So any further discussion on item 1? Seeing none. Okay, that's sorry, Director Marsh, you have 2 logins. That's why it went funny. If you have 2, it'll create a feedback loop between your 2 devices. But I'll call the question on this item. Number 1, all those in favor? And those opposed? So we have Directors Haim, Salmon, Sebring, Smith. Opposed? Did I miss anyone? No. Well, the motion carries. Back to you, Director Morrison.
Just a point of order, Mr. Chair. Is this for electoral area directors only?
No, financial votes are for the whole board.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, items 3 through 7 were significant reductions to the a number of items in Function 250 in regards to travel, conventions, and the likes. And there's what's been shared with me to this point is there would be a desire amongst some of the directors to revisit this at the next Electoral Area Services Committee. So I would move these be referred back to the next Electoral Area Services Committee, and I see I have a seconder.
Second, Director Acton. Thank you. And this is now a referral motion. Director Marsh, I did see your hand. I'll come back to you if that's okay. Unless, okay, I just wasn't sure if you wanted to speak to the referral motion or something else. Okay. On the propriety of referral. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm supporting the referral motion because it was, sorry, there's so much feedback. It was my understanding that it was to come back to committee because these were suggestions by staff, a lot of these numbers. So I look forward to further discussions.
Thank you. And I'm going to remind the directors this is a referral motion back to committee, so it's on the appropriateness of the referral back to committee. And then Director Sebring.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure why this is being referred back to. Nobody's travelling, nobody's going anywhere. I don't see why there should be any more discussions on it. As far as I can see, this is a fairly straightforward thing.
I appreciate that and bumping up the edges of discussing the merits of the item, not the referral, but I appreciate your comments. Director Sebring.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to vote against referral. I don't think it's appropriate. Because and it kind of goes to the merits of the motion, but the bottom line is the money hasn't been spent, so let's take it out of the budget instead of referring it and then potentially going, oh, let's just play a shell game and spend the money someplace else. Let's deal with it now.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the referral? Seeing none, all those in favor of the referral back to EASC? This is for all directors. And those opposed? So we've got directors Nicholson, Haim, Toporowski, Kuhn, Salmon, Wilson, Staples, Yanni DiNardo, Marsh, and Sebring. So the motion is defeated. So we're back to those items, Director Morrison.
So what's the pleasure? They be done individually or as a block?
I would say as a block, unless there's ones that the directors want to pull from the block. And that it would be appropriate to speak up now if you wish anything to be. I'm not seeing.
All right, I'll proceed. Item number 3, that the 2021 draft budget for Function 250 Electoral Area Services be amended to decrease general expenditures for community information from $57,000 to $15,000. 4, that 2021 draft budget for Function 250 Electoral Area Services be amended to 1, decrease director expenses for FCM expenditures from $18,000 to 0. 2, decrease director's travel for FCM expenditures from $13,500 to 0. Number 3, decrease director's registration expenses for FCM expenditures from $72,000 to 0. 5, that the 2021 draft budget for Function 250 Electoral Area Services be amended to 1, decrease director expenses for UBCM convention from $13,500 to 0. 2, to increase travel or decrease director's travel for UBCM convention from $4,000 to 0. And 3, decrease director's registration for UBCM convention from $7,650 to 0. 6, that the 2021 draft budget for Function 250 Electoral Area Services be amended to 1, decrease director expenses for AVICC expenditures from $6,300 to 0. 2, decrease director's travel for AVICC expenditures from $1,000 to 0. And 3, decrease director's registration for AVICC expenditures from $3,200 to 0. And 7, that the 2021 draft budget for Function 250 Electoral Area Services be amended to reduce conferences and seminars general expenditures from $15,000 to $5,000. Move those items.
Seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Now that it's on the floor, I have just a comment, if I might. This is obviously electoral area budgets, but I just hope the electoral area directors realize that this will create a bounce, and it'll definitely benefit your communities this year. But just keep in mind that when you decide you want to return to this, you're building in some $100,000 plus of taxation if you ever want to. Like, I could see reducing it to 50%, so that if you combine the 50% and go to next year and have 50%, then you're kind of got a little bit of a decrease and an increase, and you're not taxing for something you won't do. Just keep in mind that when you reduce things to 0, if you ever want to go again, you're building in a big tax increase. I go to Director Sebring and then Director Smith and Morrison.
The one thing that I know these motions was that this is for the 2021 budget. We didn't do the expenditures in 2020, so I'm trying to figure out the relationship there, because it's quite possible that AVICC and UBCM and FCM will be back in session again next year. We don't know how long COVID's going to last. Right now, it doesn't look like it, but who knows? And I'm just wondering about the practical implications. Is the idea here, and I turn to finance staff to say, the money we didn't spend this year, we're just going to squirrel that away in case we might want to use it next year. But next year we're not going to tax for it because we have the money that we didn't spend this year. Is that kind of the process that's going on here?
I'd put that through to staff.
I can take a, yeah, unless one of my finance staff wants to address it, we will end this year with a general surplus, likely end with a general surplus, and so we would need to be budgeting for that in 2021. We wouldn't earmark those funds for conferences into 2021.
So then, if I may, as a follow-up, does this mean that we're assuming that we're not going to FCM, UBCM, or ABICC next year? Is that the intent of this motion? Because that hasn't been established.
Yeah, I think it's up to electoral area directors to respond to that, because these are the motion or the discussions they had at EASC.
And that wasn't fair, so.
So I do have Director Smith, Morrison, and Staples on my list, and when we get through those, perhaps they'll elucidate us on those, the rationale for that. But yeah, good point. Obviously, if there's a surplus this year, you can use it next year. But again, the fact remains that when you do want to restore those budgets, you're going to build in a dramatic tax increase in that 1 year, just as dramatic as this one-time reduction, right? So it's probably a more balanced approach, but not my budgets. I'll go to Ms. Weiner. She has her hand up to respond to that.
Through the chair to Director Sebring, all of the excess funds for Function 250 will go into an operating reserve, and that is not to be utilized. That's only for one-time expenditures, so not ongoing expenditures. So if it was something that was looked to be put back in as an ongoing expense, eventually it would require a requisition increase or for it to be put back into the budget on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you. I have Director Smith, then Morrison, then Staples. Director Smith.
Thank you. I remember when we went through this, the total came to about 13, it came to over 13% that we would be reducing the budget to 50. And I do have concerns, because if we do a 13% decrease next year, then the year after we would need to bring back maybe 13%. Or maybe half of 13%. I would feel more comfortable with this being not these numbers, but possibly half of this, so that we can continue along. And if there's reserve funds, they can still be used. But I think it's important that we don't hit our taxpayers with a 13% increase over in 2 years' time or 3 years' time. So I cannot support this at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Director Morrison, then Staples, and I believe I saw Director Wilson and McGonigal and Nicholson. Wilson, McGonigal, Nicholson. Did I miss anyone else? No. Marsh. Okay, I'll go to Director Morrison, then Staples, Wilson, McGonigal, Nicholson, and Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So part of the rationale for the defeated referral motion was to address exactly some of these questions. There was a discussion afoot when we considered these items, because we knew that there was a recommendation that came out of the Directors Select Committee that because the previous board hadn't addressed with the remuneration question, that there might be an attempt to deal with that through the reduction of some of these one-time costs due to the COVID crisis and the lack of convention opportunities. But what staff have explained is exactly true. Any surpluses from this year don't get put into the conventions bank for next year. It goes into operating surplus. So as Director Smith has said, that this 13% hit to restore these things in the next budget cycle, which will be the 2022 budget, if this board is serious about putting in place the commitments of the Directors Select Committee and to address some of the remuneration issues, I would suggest that the budgeting in that subsequent year isn't going to be a 13% hit. It could be as much as a 22, 25% hit. So it would be more than prudent for us to go back, have another look at whether or not these numbers should be ratcheted right down to zero, because the bounce back effect, and that's one of the things that we try and do, is we try and bring level funding and level expenditures so that there isn't big hits in the budgets. So I know that the referral motion has been defeated, and it would be a shame to start going through these one at a time and to barter and debate over what might be the right number. That was why the suggestion for the referral. Well, we're not in that position now. I'm reluctant to be supporting cuts to this extent because there will have to be a bounce back if we want to get directors out to training and networking at these valuable conferences when they do resume. Thank you.
Thank you. And just before we go to Director Staples, Ms. Legault, now that the referral motion's been defeated, that option's been removed from the table. So short of defeating this motion, the directors don't have much opportunity other than to go and amend these on the fly now, which I would contend would be bad policy especially when you're talking about finance. So other than defeating this or going through and amending them one by one, those are the only remedies available to the board at this time?
Mr. Chair, I believe that the motion to refer is subject to reconsideration. So a member after the motion that is on the floor has been dealt with, a member who voted on the prevailing side could introduce a motion to reconsider.
Okay, thank you. But it would require defeating of this motion before that could be reconsidered. Okay, thank you. All right, I'll go to Director Staples, then Wilson, McGonigal, Nicholson, and Marsh. So Director Staples.
Yes, thank you. So the other part, other than what has already been said, but we did have UBCM this year, and this actually, takes every all of your ability to go to any conference when whatever form it presents itself next year away. So I think reducing it would make sense because then at least you can attend those things rather than completely taking it away as well. While it was different this year, there was still a lot of really valuable information that we gained through that process. And so I would just hate to have electoral area directors be losing out on the way that these conferences are presented this year, because I think it's important for us to be there and for all of our voices to be there as well.
Thank you. I've got Director Wilson next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Most of what I was going to say has already been said. As far as just reducing this to zero, probably not a good idea. My impression was, as Director Sebring asked, was that this money would be going into a bank for use next year if necessary, which, as Ms. Weiner has explained, is not the case. So I would be more inclined to reduce rather than totally get rid of this one. You're muted.
Muted myself to talk. Sorry, I'm going to put a question through to staff based on the way the discussion is progressing. Would it be preferable that these discussions of these individual items within the function be discussed at committee rather than at the board? I know that the fellow board members from the municipalities might prefer that, but I would ask finance staff where it's better to do that deeper discussion or heavy lifting. Is there time, I guess, to go through the budgeting process if this was further discussed at Electoral Area Services next week? Sorry, you're muted now, Ms. Weiner.
There we go. Through the chair, yeah, I would recommend putting it to the Electoral Area Services Committee next week. That still gives finance enough time, as the meeting is next week, for us to put the budget together. But with the discussion that's been mentioned and happening here, I think that's the more appropriate place to have it. For
Mr. Chairman, point of order. I'm not sure if it's a point of order, but I'm wondering if we can shortcut this. I voted with the prevailing side. I would make a motion that we reconsider the motion to refer.
So I know that we can't do that until we defeat this motion. So I'm going to go through the speakers list, and if the speaker...
No, I don't believe that's true. I think we can reconsider the motion to refer without defeating this. Am I correct, Ms. Legault?
I believe there's my understanding is there's a motion on the floor moved and seconded, so it's on the floor.
So can I just say, regardless of procedure, defeating it would be clean, regardless if we can enter and then I'm sure if this is defeated, I think the board is speaking that the referral reconsideration, I'll come to you directly after.
Okay, thank you.
Director McGonigal, did you want to speak to this, or can we process?
I'd like to call the question, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'm going to allow Directors Nicholson and Marsh if they wish to speak on it, but I think no, okay. So I'm going to call the question on the motion. If this is hope to reconsider and send it back to committee, we need to defeat this motion. All those in favor? Director Kuhn is in favor. All those opposed? Director Kuhn is opposed. I think the opposition is unanimous. The motion is defeated, and I'll go back to Director Sebring.
And on that basis, Mr. Chair, as someone who voted with the prevailing side on the initial motion to refer to committee, I would move that we reconsider the motion to send this item back to the Electoral Area Services Committee for consideration.
Been seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. So if I know my process as poorly as I think I do, this brings the referral motion back to the table for consideration. So this isn't the vote on the referral, but you do want to support the motion to reconsider if you want to consider the referral. On the motion to reconsider, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. The motion to refer is back on the floor. Do we need to discuss the motion to refer? Thank you for not discussing the motion to refer. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. Well, we got back to the starting point and progressed on. Anything else further, Director Morrison?
Yeah, I think the next two reports, actually. Would you like me to proceed with CR5?
Excuse me, did we read number 2?
Yeah, at the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or number 2, 1, and 2. Yeah, the draft budget functions for Shawnigan. Yeah, those were passed, I believe. Ms. Legault, can you confirm?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And we also did number 8, just to be clear, the criteria for expenditures for the conventions.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
And I'll go back to Director Morrison for CR5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your reports and recommendations from EASC meeting of September 16th, 2020. Anybody want any of these pulled? We've got 1 through 6 for all directors. I think they're fairly straightforward. I will start with 1. That CVRD bylaw number 2810, Satellite Park Water System Service Establishment bylaw 2006, be amended to increase the maximum annual requisition limit from 49,960 to the greater of 62,450, or an amount that equals the amount raised by applying a property value tax rate of 1.167 per thousand to the net taxable value of land and improvements in the service area. 2, that CVRD bylaw number 1911, Shawnigan Lake North Water System Service Establishment bylaw 1999, be amended to increase the maximum annual requisition limit from 224,820 to the greater of 281,025, or an amount that equals the amount raised by applying a property value tax rate of 0.762 per thousand to the net taxable value of land and improvements in the service area. Trying as hard as I can to be interesting and burying my pitch. Director Yanni DiNardo had her hand up. Was she making a point of order?
Yes, point of order. I just wondered if we could, there's quite a few of them. Can we just move them as a block? Are they on our website and everybody has seen them? Can these ones just be moved as a block, or do we have to read them?
Ms. Legault? I know our practice is to read them, but I always find that laborious myself. But
they can be read as
a
block.
I just noticed that we have such a large amount that, and it's quite late, that I wondered if there was...
I think it's the pleasure of the board, really. I don't think there's a requirement to read them. I think that the items can be moved, but it's up to the... Sorry, Director Smith, I saw your hand, and when I'm done speaking, I'll come to you. But it's not necessary under any kind of rules. It's just our practice. Director Smith.
Yes, number 3 was sent back to staff, so it shouldn't be on here. So can we pull it?
So how is it sent back to staff? Once it's recommended by the...
It wasn't recommended at EASC. It was sent back to staff at EASC.
For clarification, point of clarification, at the very end of that clause, it says referred back to staff.
Oh, okay. Oh, that the motion is that it be referred back to staff. Sorry, because the recommendation comes forward and it does say be referred back to staff. So everybody's on the same page.
Mr. Chair, how about we do this? Since I've called for if there were any to be pulled and there were none to be pulled, why don't I proceed with recommending that items 1 through 6 be approved as recommended at committee and see if there's a seconder.
Seconded by Director Acton. Any discussion on that block, including the referral back of that item to to staff? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Back to you, Director Morrison, for the bottom half. For EAS directors only.
Thank you for that clarifications. We have 7 through 11, and would anyone like any of those pulled? Seeing none, I'll move 7 through 11 as a block.
And seconded by Director Smith for electoral area directors only. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Back to you, Director Morrison, I believe, for CR6.
CR6 is a report and recommendation from October 7th, 2020. I see someone would like to have something pulled, perhaps, Director Acton?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to pull number 3 and refer it back to Electoral Area Services, considering that there's new information to be considered.
So the pulling, we'll pull it, and then once we come back to it, you can make the motion.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll recommend items 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6, and 7 for all directors to vote on.
And do we have a seconder, Director Yanni DiNardo? Any discussion on those items? Seeing none, this is for all directors. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Back to you, Director Morrison.
Item 3, I gather the director would like it referred back to committee for further discussion based on new information, so I would move that.
Seconded by Director Acton. Any discussion on that item? Seeing none, all those in favor? And any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Back to you, Director Morrison.
And for CR6, for electoral area directors only, I see 3 items, and I would move 8, 9, and 10 for electoral area directors only.
Seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any discussion on those? Seeing none, all those in favor? And any opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
Concludes my reports.
Thank you. Ms. Legault. I'm myself. Oh, there we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On to director's reports. Item DR1, Director Wilson regarding Fisher Road Industrial Area operations in Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill, ongoing issues.
Thank you. I'll go to Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you all know, it's a pretty long report. I don't intend to go through it because I'm sure you've all studied it in great detail. So basically, I'm just here to answer questions or queries that you might have.
Thank you, Director Wilson. I'll go to Director Morrison, but I think Mr. Carruthers may have some help with potential motion as well, but I'll go to Director Morrison.
There's a lot of information to unbundle in this, and I was going to recommend that it be referred back to staff for eventual report to Regional Services Committee for items that are appropriate for us to consider and advocate for.
Sorry, is that a second, Director Wilson? Or is that actually a motion, Director Morrison?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. If I could just very quickly speak on that, I do have some a resolution ready, which addresses exactly what Director Morrison has said there, which I can forward whenever necessary. But it does address what Director Morrison has just brought up.
Okay, because this is a really complicated issue, I don't want us to get too deep into the rabbit hole because I think we need some reports back from staff. Before I take the motion, Mr. Crothers, did you have anything to weigh in on this, just as advice? Because I know there are, you know, it's a multi-layered issue, right? So.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a proposed resolution for the board to potentially consider, and I forwarded it to the corporate officer. But the resolution suggested to the board would be that staff be directed to prepare a report that discusses the jurisdictional, regulatory, and legal issues associated with the oversight of Fisher Road recycling and other private recycling and compost facilities licensed by the CBRD.
Okay, so that's a great suggested wording. I'm going to give the director who put the work into this just the opportunity to enter his resolutions, because I do think we're all kind of skirting around the same substance here. But I'll go to Director Wilson, and then hopefully we can move this forward. Director Wilson. Director Wilson, you're still muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I did get this one via Ms. Legault, and I did send a reply to her. And much as I appreciate the work that has been done on this, I just find that one just a little bit too general in thing. I would much rather be more specific in asking staff to address some of these concerns. And I do have a suggested resolution, albeit a little longer than what's been suggested here. I would love to be more specific on this as opposed to general.
Please read your recommendation out, and if you get a seconder, we can go from there and see if it all seems to align with more specificity.
Okay, hang on a second. I just got to find it here. Okay. Sorry, I found the wrong one here. There it is there. That staff prepare a report for Regional Service Committee that comprehensively addresses the following. A, bylaw actions that may be taken that will ensure that the owners and operators in the Fisher Road industrial area are more closely monitored with respect to sources of nuisance and complaint. B, positive and robust action to collectively address and rectify the ongoing concerns of residents by rigid enforcement of prescribed bylaws and operating plan requirements. C, positive and robust action by bringing these matters to the attention of those provincial authorities responsible for issuing permits and for policing these facilities. And finally, reevaluates the revenue paid to privately owned and operated facilities by the CVRD in the Fisher Road industrial area for transfer of waste collected by the CVRD at regionally owned and operated recycling facilities, and to assess whether that waste could be processed by an alternative publicly owned waste disposal or recycling facilities. And I'm quite willing to speak on each one of those, and I apologize for it being kind of long, but this is a very, very complex situation here that really has gone on for a long, long time.
Director, yeah, before we get into start speaking on the motion, do I have a seconder for that motion as a package? Is that Director Smith seconding? Okay, thank you. I'll go to just a question for staff. I know that was a lot to take in, and I know that that's more specificity. Is there anything in your suggested motion that was missed in that? Because I know there are, it is layered. Don't worry, Director Sebring, I saw you. I'll get you on the list. I just want some feedback from staff if that accomplishes all that you were hoping to report back to the board or to committee with.
Sorry, clarity of your question, Chair Stone. You
had a suggested resolution for the board. Director Wilson had his own that he's moved and is seconded. Even though there's more specificity and a lot more words in that motion, is there anything in your suggested motion that would be missed by the resolution that's on the floor?
No, my concern would be, Mr. Chair, that this is a very complex report, and there's a number of complex issues that have been raised. There are some legal issues. There are some bylaw enforcement issues. think the board would benefit from having a good understanding of the various limitations and issues associated with not only managing Fisher Road recycling, but our other recycling facilities that we license. And so I am going to recommend that the board has a better understanding before it starts to get more specific in terms of specific actions. I think those actions may be premature without understanding some legal implications and some bylaw enforcement implications.
Sorry, my understanding of the motion was that it directs staff to report back on all of those items.
Correct.
Right, so it's not specifying any action, it's specifying staff to report back to the committee on the opportunity for those actions.
And the various issues and challenges associated with them, yes, correct.
And that's what Director Wilson's motion said, was it started off with have staff report back to the committee, did it not? So all of those things that read out weren't prescriptive actions. It was to have staff report back on. So I was just wondering, like, I appreciate the specificity, but I think staff can also take a little bit of latitude and say, well, we've addressed this issue in our report, but there's also a couple of other considerations here that connect to that. And that's the kind of information we would expect back from staff. So I'm just trying to, you know, we can go through a big debate on Director Wilson's motions and see if it passes or it gets defeated. But what I was trying to get at was when it's asking for a report back, and although there are specific items listed, I would assume that staff's professional responsibility would be to also illuminate the committee members, either in closed or open, as is appropriate for the specific request, on those items and anything connected to them. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is I heard the specificity of Director Wilson's motion. I heard the generality of your motion. I don't think they're mutual exclusive. So I was asking if the board passed Director Wilson's motion and we get those reports back, will it provide us with at least the same level of detail? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'm going to go back to my speakers list then. Thank you for the clarity. I believe I had Director Morrison, and I see Director Kuhn's hand, or I had Director Sebring after Director Morrison and then Director Kuhn. So Director Morrison, did you want to speak to it?
Can you put me on the bottom of the list, please?
Okay, I'll go to Director Sebring and then Director Kuhn and then back to Director Morrison.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I am going to respectfully vote against the motion that's on the table, not because I disagree with the intent, but I really, really prefer what I heard from Mr. Carruthers, particularly the clause and other private recycling and composting facilities licensed by the CBRD. This is not exclusively a Fisher Road problem. We're hearing about it in Chemainus. Believe me, we hear about it in Chemainus at least once or twice a week, because we have exactly the same kinds of problems here. And I appreciate the motion as I heard it from Director Wilson, that we look at the possibility of diverting our waste to publicly owned facilities. Fair enough. I just worry that at the end of the day, we may end up, if we don't take a comprehensive region-wide look at this, diverting waste from Fisher Road to Chemainus and increasing my problems. So I would greatly prefer that we do a more holistic, general look at this. And I think staff has heard your specific, and certainly your report, and I read it and I was fascinated. I think staff has heard your specific concerns, which are addressed in your motion, and I'm quite sure that those specific concerns, as they're bulleted out, including where the waste goes and how much money we spend on it, et cetera, will be addressed in that report. But I would prefer to have the direction to staff be, if I can put it this way, specifically more general, so that the specificity is give it to us for the whole regional district. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you. I've added you, Director Wilson. I saw your hand. I have Director Kuhn, Morrison, and Wilson.
Yes, I second Director Wilson, Sebring's thoughts. My concern is if we go into the very details of, as outlined in the second resolution, then if it turns out that some of these detailed investigations, and I'm concerned about cost as well, might not be necessary. So, for my thinking, it would be better to have a more general inquiry, and then if out of that it becomes obvious that, well, we have to dig further into this, then we can dig further. And I'm this is almost what, yeah, it's for a beginning investigation. It's too detailed for my taste. It's I think general would be a lot better. So I would support Mr. Carruthers' proposal there.
Thank you. I'll go to Director Morrison and then Director Wilson to close on this motion. Oh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I said earlier, there's a lot to unbundle in the report that the directors has put forward to us. And I look at the nature of the reports that we act upon, and I think that Director Wilson has provided us with some interesting foundational stuff to explore. But I just look at the concept of looking to divert solid waste that's going to that facility to another facility in another jurisdiction, and yet it's going to that facility because of a failure to establish a South End depot. And some of us were around when there were attempts to establish a South End depot, and we're where we're at because of competitive processes where different organizations bid on contracts, and we're where we're at now. I think that there's merit in a lot of what Director Wilson has said, but there's already been a significant amount of effort going into this, and we usually respond on recommendations based on our professional staff's advice, and to give them a specific narrow focus of which to focus on is, I think, an error. And I think either the suggestion that Mr. Carruthers had put forward so that we can get a broader, fuller taste, and there's no reason why we couldn't direct staff to dig deeper into more specific areas when a report comes back. But at this point, it would be a very exhaustive effort on the part of staff that would, I believe, be too focused and too narrow and take a lot of resources away from other areas. So I'd like to see a preliminary report come back on the general themes, and we can direct further, more specific themes if we need to. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to let Director Wilson close. I'm going to go to Director Nicholson, and then I'll go to Director Wilson.
Okay, thank you. I was just thinking that this is, I think I agree with the regional approach at this point, and I'm thinking that I would be very interested in understanding as we move into, we've got on the horizon organic pickup everywhere. I think that's going to be brought in 21 or 22. I would be very interested in understanding how these added services are going to be dealt with from a facility perspective. Yeah, because I think that could have that could be making the problem even worse.
Thank you. Good point. I will go to Director Wilson, and then hopefully we can call the question on the motion that's on the floor. Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand, you know, maybe narrowing things down for staff to focus on is perhaps not quite as good an idea as I originally thought. So I'm inclined to go along with the general report. And to answer, I must admit that if Director Sebring is only getting 2 complaints a week, lucky you. I wish that was the case with me. I'm getting 2 or 3 a day. And these are not, you know, okay, a lot of them are coming from the same area, but that's where the prevailing winds are. And also, just to put Director Sebring's mind at rest, I didn't realise that Chemainus was in the picture. I was actually suggesting the RDN depot at Duke Point towards Nanaimo. And I looked into the costs. It would be no more expensive to send it there. The thing is, I'm really concerned that with the complaints and with the problems that we're having in that area, that we as the CVRD are basically financing a lot of the problems there to the tune of $765,000 per year. That's a lot of money. So I'd love to see that directed towards our own facilities, maybe to make them better. As far as Director Morrison's comment on this would be an exhaustive effort by staff, yes, it would. But I'd like to point out this has been an exhaustive effort on the part of my constituents, my residents as well, who have put up with this for years and years and years, and nothing seems to be done. There's my problem here. So I'm asking, yes, I will go along with an amended resolution, but I'm just trying to point out that we've got to do something. We've got to do something.
Thank you. So I'm going to suggest to the board that the best way to handle it would be to actually defeat this motion and then allow another motion to be moved rather than try to amend this motion, because they are somewhat materially different. I do want to say, Director Wilson, I don't think anyone at this board, even our newer members, are mute or blind or dumb to the issues that you're facing in Cobble Hill. I do know from Director Sebring that if he's down to 1 or 2 complaints a week, they're doing all right, but it's been an ongoing issue for many years. And having only been on this board for a second term, I can tell you that the issues around the Cobble Hill community have come and gone consistently over the lifespan of it. So it is a challenge. And in Ladysmith, we've had our own issues. At least you're not composting biosolids. Let me put it that way, because it's even worse. But that being said, I'm going to call the question on this motion, and then if it's defeated, then we can get Mr. Carruthers to read the suggestion, and we can go from there. Call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? So opposed, we have Directors Haim, Toporowski, Morrison, Kuhn, McGonigal, Acton, Sebring, Yanni DiNardo, and Marsh. So the motion is defeated. And Mr. Carruthers, can you please read out your suggested wording again?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to. That staff prepare a report for Regional Services Committee that addresses the jurisdictional, regulatory, and legal issues associated with oversight of Fisher Road recycling and other private recycling and composting facilities that are licensed by the CVRD.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder or a mover for that motion, first of all? Director Kuhn, seconded by Director Sebring, and then any questions? So I just, okay, Director McGonigal and Director Morrison.
Just a comment, if I may, and I think through the discussion that we've had, Director Wilson, that your specific issues will be brought forward in the discussion through Mr. Carruthers and staff. They have heard your complaints. We've heard the complaints for my lifetime within the CVRD region. We certainly do respect the problems within that area and the community that you represent.
So I'm just going to just mention again to the directors, or maybe it's just background noise for you, Director McGonigal. It's just that I kept hearing what sounded like other noise in the background, but I'll go to Director Morrison next.
I'd love to be corrected if I'm wrong, but I thought there was reference in an original motion there that this report be prepared and sent to regional services. Was that initially part of your resolution, Mr. Carruthers, or would it come back to the board?
No, I'm recommending it goes back to regional services.
Okay, I don't think you read that out, but as long as that's part of the resolution, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay. And so I just have one question then, if I didn't miss anyone else on the speakers list. So I assume when we say report, it may actually be more than one report, because I think there are issues here that would be to either open or close.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. There will be legal and bylaw enforcement issues that will be covered and closed.
Thank you. And I just want to make a statement in support of you, Director Wilson, and I do appreciate the frustration. And I just want your community members to be clear that none of us are passive about the issue or blind or olfactory senses turned off to the issue. So just keep in mind, and I hope that they can see this meeting and see that the board supports you in doing this investigation and hopefully coming to a resolution and a resolve for the issue over the long term.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I could just say, it is a long report. If any of the directors have any other questions at all, just contact me and I'll be happy to answer them if necessary.
Thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Director Wilson opposed. The motion carries. All right. I believe we can move on, Ms. Legault, to staff reports.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. SR1 is a staff report from the General Manager, Land Use Services regarding soil deposit permit number SDC 2005. The recommendation for consideration is that Resolution 20-313 be rescinded. 2, that soil deposit permit SDC 20-05 for PID 001170406 be issued.
Thank you. Director Salmon?
Yeah, thank you. So I'll just very brief background, but this is the large one in near the Bamberton lands in Mill Bay, 400,000 cubic meters. So originally we had, is public interest, so I'd asked for APC site visit, which was allowed under the permit application. However, since then we've had the legal review and the workshop staff report, apparently not allowed under the Local Government Act. So with that in mind, I would move the recommendation.
Thank you. And seconded by Director Morrison. I did see Director Acton's hand go up. Did you have a question or a comment? Director Acton?
Sorry. Well, I would like to, I have another motion once this motion is.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. I'll go back to Director Acton.
Am I allowed to do a comment before my motion?
If it's related to a motion you'd like to put forward, usually put your motion forward, then get a seconder, and then comment on it, but.
Well, it's not necessarily, it's not necessarily a comment on my motion. I just like to say that, you know, the public waited a really long time for this soil bylaw, and as far as I can tell, it's been quite a letdown. So it's really unfortunate. I feel like and I was one of them. I was the public before being on this board, almost being promised that the soil bylaw was going to be the answer to our prayers, and it actually hasn't been an answer to anything, but or not very much. So my motion, I'd like to speak to my motion is that I would like to move that we ask for a legal review of our soil bylaw and ask for suggested amendments by our legal counsel.
Okay, is that seconded by Director Salmon? Question through to staff. For some reason, I thought we had done that, or was it just more about informing the directors about where we are currently at?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Ask the question.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's correct. I think what Director Acton is looking for is a more fulsome legal review with potential options for amendments.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, thank you. It's this and this, right? Usually Klaus does this when I talk too much, so I was just trying to shut up. Sorry, Director Salmon, you had seconded it. Did you wish to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I think I was actually cut off when we were talking about it earlier, but yes, particularly based on legal review we've had.
Thank you. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I see Ms. Trelf is on the line, and it was my understanding that we have a fulsome review of the soil deposit bylaw underway as we speak, and of course, legal would be part and parcel of that. So I'd love to be corrected if I'm wrong, but I think the resolution is superfluous because we've already got staff working on this exact project.
Okay, I would look to staff to comment on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that, you know, for certainty and probably for the benefit of the public, it would be great to have a resolution formally directing staff to undertake a review of the CVRD's soil regulation program and soil deposit bylaw. Program's been in effect for, I think, roughly a year, and so we also feel as though this is timely.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's not me opposed, that was a scratching. None opposed, motion carries. Okay, thank you very much. We can move on, I believe, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. SR2 is a staff report from Legislative Services on ministerial order approval for Electoral Area H by-election, and my apologies for the lateness of the report, but we just received the order this morning, mid-morning.
Thank you.
The proposed resolution is that the implementation of provisions contained in Ministerial Order number M389 for the administration of the 2020 by-election in Electoral Area H North Oyster Diamond be approved.
Moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director Morrison. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On to bylaws. Item B1 is CVRD Bylaw 4338, Shawnigan Lake North Water System Service Amendment Bylaw 2020 for first, second, and third reading.
Moved by Director Acton, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault.
Item B2, CVRD Bylaw 4339, Satellite Park Water System Service Amendment, Requisition Limit Bylaw 2020 for first, second, and third reading.
Need a mover. Moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Staples. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault.
Item B3, CVRD Bylaw 4340, Arbutus Mountain Estates Sewer System Service Establishment Bylaw for first, second, and third readings.
Moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault for Electoral Area Directors only.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. BEA 1, CVRD Bylaw 4302, Cowichan Lake South Scots Falls Zoning Amendment Bylaw for PID 012490890-2020 for second reading as amended.
Moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Kuhn. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault.
CVRD Bylaw 4335, South Cowichan Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2020 for third reading.
Moved by Director Acton, seconded by Director Smith. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. And Ms. Legault.
CVRD Bylaw 4335, South Cowichan Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2020 for adoption.
Moved by Director Smith, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And opposed? None opposed, motion carries. We're burning right along. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. BEA 3, CVRD Bylaw 4336, Electoral Area I, Yubo Mead Creek Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2020 for third reading.
Moved by Director Kuhn, seconded by Director Smith. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault.
And CVRD Bylaw 4336, Electoral Area I, Yubo Mead Creek Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2020 for adoption.
Moved by Director Smith, seconded by Director Kuhn. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On to unfinished business. Item UB1, staff report from the Legislative Services Division on a review of electronic meetings. This was from a referral from June 24th board meeting. The recommendation for consideration is that the CVRD continue with electronic board and standing committee meetings. 2, that the continuation of electronic board and standing committee meetings be reviewed in January 2021. And 3, that public input period submissions for virtual meetings be forwarded to directors a half hour prior to meeting start time, with the chair providing a verbal summary of input received for the meeting.
Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Acton. Discussion. Director Nicholson, and then Director Wilson and Director Smith. Director Nicholson, go ahead.
Thank you. I can't support number 3, and I would like, I would much prefer if this could be referred to committee for a more fulsome discussion. I noticed that Susan Kaufman did send in a public input thing on this particular topic, and I was not comfortable with, I agree with some of her points, and I was not comfortable with what has been recommended on point number 3. And I also think it speaks directly to what Mr. Price of One Cowichan raised in his letter earlier. So I think we really need to have a discussion and think it through and do that in the context of the Code of Conduct.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Director Wilson, then Smith, then Sebring. Director Wilson.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm in the same of the same opinion as Director Nicholson. I can't support number 3. To me, it's we need to be as open and transparent as we can be, especially in these times, and we can't be seen to. And it will appear to the public if we shut this down. It will appear to the public that we don't want to hear from them. Well, we do. I certainly do. I spend a lot of time trying to listen to everything that's being said by by the residents of Cobble Hill. It would be a shame, and it would not be a good thing to shut this down. So I'm not in favour of number 3 at all. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Director Smith and Director Sebring. Director Smith.
Yes, I'm also not in favor of number 3. I think that public input's very valuable for us all to listen to. It's an opportunity to actually hear the public give their input on items that are on the agenda for that day. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Sebring.
I'm going to be completely contrarian here. I have concerns about number 3 as well, but from the totally opposite end of the spectrum. This is the way we have done it at my council table since the beginning of COVID. And we faced no end of criticism because the summaries weren't accurate. Whether it was, for a while I was reading them, for a while staff was reading them, particularly when I was reading them, it's like, yeah, the politicians are just, cherry picking the stuff they want to hear, which was not the case. Then staff was reading, we were still getting criticism. So we have gone to the exact opposite of this. We have said, and it's coming to our next council meeting as a resolution because we're right in the middle of it, people are free to provide whatever input they can. And this notion of the deadline a half hour prior to meeting start time is a bit ridiculous. You can't expect us as directors to read through all that stuff within 30 minutes. We've said, I think it's noon the day before, and if you submit it by noon the day before, we will guarantee that every councillor in this case has a copy and that they will read it. The purpose of public input, with all due respect, is to give input to the directors. It is not to stand in front of the board and, I don't want to use the word, but I'm going to use the word, grandstand with your political position. It is to inform our discussion and debate. And the way we've decided to handle it at North Cowichan, pending, we did this at Committee of the Whole, it's yet to be ratified, is we've said, we will promise you that everything that is submitted by the deadline will be forwarded to council and councillors will read and consider that input. The purpose of public input is to inform the councillors, the directors. It's not to enlarge the debate within the community. We need to hear about it as the directors councillors, whatever it is. So we're going even further than this recommends. And I'd really recommend against the summaries. If we're going to stick with reading out the input, we're better off to read the input verbatim, because you're going to get criticized for doing the summaries. I can tell you that right now. So yeah, that's my perspective. Thank you.
Directors McGonigal and Wilson, I'm just going to enter in here though that it seems like there's different reasons for the consideration about discussion around public input. I don't think at this late hour is the time to go into that debate. So I would frankly rather support some committee work around this during an afternoon meeting than getting into it tonight, but I'll go to Director McGonigal and then Director Wilson.
And I think it's important that we give the public their opportunity for input, but that is exactly as Director Seaborn says, that's public input for the directors around the table. Unfortunately, in our virtual forum, it is utilized in another way. It's not informative for the purpose that public input was established. I would rather see this go back to whichever appropriate committee for some reasonable discussion on what is appropriate to move forward with continuous virtual public input and the appropriateness that we can move forward on that. So I would recommend either referral back to a committee or tabling this to the appropriate committee, whichever is appropriate.
Yeah, a referral motion would be the best way to do that, but we keep talking about a referral instead of making a motion.
I will make a motion to refer, Mr. Chair, to regional services or corporate services, whichever is appropriate committee.
Got all kinds of hands up. Al, you can do your point of order, and then I'll go to Ms. Legault because I think she's probably going to inform us anyway.
I'm just wondering whether, and I'm not sure what the rules are at this table, whether a motion to sever would be appropriate, because I don't think anybody has a problem with the first two bullets. There's no reason to refer those for discussion. So I'd like to sever number 3 and then consider the first two. And then if we can take number 3 and pump that off to committee, I think that'd be good.
Ms. Legault, I'll let you inform us first. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
I was just going to mention that there was a motion on the floor, and this is a way of handling it, of course.
Well, of course, referring the whole motion to committee is also a way to deal with it. But so you made a motion to sever. Do we have a seconder? Director Staples, do we vote on a motion to sever, or is that chair? I think usually the chair just says, okay, we'll deal with number 3 separately. Okay, thank you. So back to number 1 and 2. Any discussions on number 1 and 2? Seeing none, I'll call the question on 1 and 2. All those in favor? And those opposed? Just me. I think this is crazy when I'm watching other councils every day meet in person and boards that we're still doing WebEx, but that I'm the minority, clearly. Moving on to number 3 then. We've heard a lot of discussion on it. Does somebody want to make, question through to staff. This would be a referral to corporate services. Okay, Director Morrison.
So just a little clarification on that.
Yes. Director Morrison, your microphone's up top.
Thank you. So this is an item for board consideration and a board policy that will then flow through to committees and standing committees and the likes. So I'm more inclined that this be a board discussion with the weight and the attention that comes to board meetings, and I'm reluctant to say send it back to another committee. It truly does reside with the board as a board policy. I would be far more inclined to have this discussion at a board meeting in the afternoon as opposed to referring it to a committee and then having it come back, because you do the work at the committee, but an awful lot of people don't bother observing our committee work. So just a suggestion. I don't know what Ms. Legault thinks about this. We're developing board policy, and I think it should reside at the board.
Ms. Legault, have you got any comment on that?
Well, I mean, it's the will of the board. My philosophy is generally that the heavy lifting happens at committee, but I'm happy to work with whatever the board wants.
Sorry, I thought of it as, you know, things that flow through to board policy would be discussed at corporate services and go through to the board, but I have no preference. I just think that we are making something that could have already been referred to the appropriate place longer. So next I have Director Marsh. Oh, sorry, I'll come to you, Director Wilson, I missed you. Check you off my list before I actually called on you, but I'll go to Director Marsh.
Okay, sorry, Director Wilson. It looks like things aren't going to go boink, boink, boink on my computer right now, so that's a good thing. I think that I would like to see it done at the board too, because, you know, so many things have changed. You know, you referred to one just recently, Mr. Chair, the COVID meetings online and everything. And I think that if the public hears the kind of debate, which I suspect will happen, that North Cowichan did at Committee of the Whole, they'll understand that they'll actually get, their input will get more time to, for directors to consider. You know, I remember you know, not everybody was in favor when I first brought this forward at North Cowichan 7 or 8 years ago. And now that I see, so when we were talking about, yeah, right up till noon before the meeting, I'm like, you know, like I walk my dog before the meeting at 1:30. I do different things. So I think that in a way I made a mistake by thinking it has to happen at the meeting. I think it just has to happen. And if we can talk in the debate about, we'll then have more time to consider the various opinions we get than if we just hear it, 3 people for 3 minutes. So I think it should happen in the board, although I know it's unusual, Ms. Legault, and it's probably not best practice usually. We're not in usual times. So that would be, I don't know if there's a motion.
I was just going to clarify. I wasn't sure if the referral motion had been moved and seconded. We're starting to debate the issue. We're talking about referring back to actually debate. But Ms. Legault, do we have a referral motion on the floor?
I don't believe it was seconded.
Okay. So Director Marsh, this would be a great opportunity to refer number 3 back to the next board meeting for further discussion, and hopefully if we get that motion passed, then staff can prioritize it near the top of the agenda.
Done.
Okay, so that's been moved by Director Marsh. Do we have a seconder? It's to refer number 3 back to the future board meeting, which would be hopefully the next board meeting. Seconded by Director Sebring. Any further discussion on the referral? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, or sorry, Director McGonigal opposed. Motion carries. Sorry, Director Wilson, I cut you off there by trying to expedite things. Are we okay to duke it out at committee or at?
Yeah, that's fine. Just a quick question that I was going to ask there. If it comes to the letters are shared with us, let's say the day before, and we've got plenty of time to read them, does that still give us the time to discuss that? Will there be a period for discussion of those points which have been brought up by the public, or is it purely for reading material for our information?
That would be a decision of the board. So that's what we'll discuss. And then if we come up with a revised policy that we adopt as a group, then that's how it will be. So just keep those quivers in those arrows in your quiver, and we can discuss that at the next board meeting. All right, any further discussion before we go to question period? Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of items. The first is the item we referred to earlier in the meeting from Jen Voigt. Dear Chair and Board, thank you for your ongoing efforts to deal with COVID-19 emergency. In times of crisis, we rely on our local governments for support and leadership. We felt compelled to get a message out there that we also want to know the same answers as our friends whose letter was received under the title Local Governments Urge to Focus Attention on Climate Change, as the undersigned believe that there must be a healthy balance in between the environment and business, which is why our messaging and our asks are similar in nature. In the face of COVID-19, our attention became focused on the health and well-being of our families, our friends, and our neighbors, and the potential implications that we did and continue to face as our numbers rise again. In the face of this pandemic, we cannot forget what it is that has kept our community pressing forward and thriving in its own way. Local businesses. Our local businesses and those who own, operate, are employed, and most of all, those who support them are what has kept the Cowichan strong. We do not see an end to the pandemic anytime soon, but we are grateful to live, work, and play in the Cowichan Valley, a place where local means something and supporting one another means something. Many industries have remained strong through the past 6 months, including agriculture, food producers, real estate, contractors, builders, and professions that support businesses. Many adapted to what was needed and in some cases even expanded, including hiring people. Today we are writing you to ask for your support. We want to ask the question, what is our local government doing or planning to do to ensure the success of our communities by enticing new business and supporting growth and development in our region? What is our local government doing or planning to do to keep the Cowichan Valley a leader in economic development on Vancouver Island? We ask that the answers to our questions be in writing and shared publicly so that all local citizens can be informed and educated about how our local government plans to support its business, agriculture, contractors, and developers in the future. Thank you for your leadership, and there are about 58 signatories to this letter.
Thank you. I believe most of the board members will have received that today. If not, I'll share a copy with you, and I've discussed with Ms. Voigt to send it as a formal piece of correspondence. Just to answer, I know that we've had several reports in the last couple of months about the ongoing efforts of Economic Development Cowichan and other stakeholders working in collaboration around supporting businesses through COVID and other initiatives that are happening within Economic Development Cowichan and in the broader community. So that be as it may, I think we can have more of an economically focused discussion in an upcoming meeting, and we'll be able to address it more fully at that time.
The next item is from Cliff
Evans. Director March, thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Legault.
The next item is from Cliff Evans regarding soil deposit bylaw review. He is asking if the public, truckers, and contractors can have input to the revision of the soil deposit bylaw.
I would say that once we get a review back from staff, we could have some discussion on how we engage the community in potential changes, but I can't make any commitments as part of chair question period. So I would have to refer that discussion to a future meeting where those proposed opportunities are discussed by the board.
And then, Mr. Chair, just a note that we did receive a public input period submission from Susan Kaufman, but it didn't arrive until about 7:20, so it was after public input, and it was with respect to the public input period discussion that we just had as part of the virtual meeting environment, and her request was to refer it for further discussion, so I'm not going to read the full submission at this time.
Okay, and I believe that directors do have that in their inbox so that they can review it, and we'll have a more full discussion at our next board meeting. Ms. Legault, is that it?
That is all for public input period.
Thank you. Directors, before I call for a motion to adjourn, I just want to say thank you. We had a tough agenda with some difficult issues to deal with today. Doesn't mean that we're done dealing with them, but hopefully we can use this as a pivot and an opportunity to work together more collaboratively, internally and externally. And hopefully our community hears that from us. I thought it was good discussion tonight, and I appreciate all of your good participation. So with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director Nicholson. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed.